Ben, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Before we even started recording, I found out you grew up in the town next to me. This is fate. How are you?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, it's crazy. Small world, right?
Oh, such a small world. Well, we're here today to discuss forest bathing. Oh, my Lord, what is that? Before we get into the what, the why, the how, let's talk about you. Who are you? How did you find yourself being an advocate and facilitator for forest bathing in your own life? How has it helped you in your changed your life? Tell me all those things.
I guess part of my conviction about forest bathing is that we are all born as forest bathers because we're all born as sensory beings that are connecting with the world around them through the intelligence of our bodies. And that's really the original intelligence. This is kind of a pre-verbal, pre-cognitive, pre-egoic intelligence that lives within the body. And Jung has this great expression about your body has more wisdom than your deepest philosophy. And I think that's very true. Um, I grew up in a town with a lot of forest. So I spent a lot of time just kind of doing forest bathing without knowing I was doing it. I actually get a ton of people that come through the training that that's kind of what they say as way of introduction. They say, I think I've been doing this my whole life. I just never really knew it had a name. And on some level, I think that's true. And on some level, once you have kind of a more formalized practice of it, it can just get deeper and deeper.
Well, you mentioned in your answers there that you said you've been doing this your whole life without even giving it a name, and many other of your trainees have echoed the same sentiment. Let's talk about the origins, the more formal origins of forest bathing. We've likely been doing this for thousands of years historically. But from your book, I learned that modern forest bathing originated in the 1980s in Japan. Talk to me about that. How did this movement, if you even want to call it a movement, come to be? What was missing in Japanese culture that forest bathing filled? What void did it fill? Tell me all of that.
Right. So this is a fascinating and challenging conversation because the more I learn about this, the deeper it gets. But the first thing to say is that forest bathing, that term was coined in the 1980s, and I'll talk about that in a second. But that somehow kind of obfuscates the reality of like hundreds of years of Japanese culture. And the indigenous religion of Japan is called Shinto. And Shinto identifies these kind of spiritual entities called kami in the beings of the more than human world. So a mountain has this spiritual character, a river has this spiritual character. And so woven into the fabric of Japanese society is this real reverence for nature. And that's been there for hundreds of years. So even though we're thinking about forest bathing as kind of a modern invention, I think it's really rooted in Zen in particular, and Shinto before that really provides the kind of philosophical soil that this kind of a practice can grow in. But okay, 1980s. Basically, what's happening in Japan at this moment is that they're having an enormous transformation in their economy, and everyone's moving to the cities. It's like this big tech boom. They're going from a mostly outdoor agricultural society to a mostly urban indoor tech-based economy. And there are two massive consequences to this. The first is a health problem. Basically, all of a sudden, the government notices this huge spike in cancer and autoimmune disease, people dying of stress. The Japanese even coined a word called karoshi, which is death by overwork. So people were literally just dying from this incredibly fast paced urban lifestyle. Now, the other problem was an economic problem, which is when all the people move from the rural prefectures into the cities, it devastates the economy of those rural communities. So all the young men are moving to the city to make money, and all the children and the old folks are staying in the countryside, but there's no way to make money. So this is where they have this kind of interesting synchronicity in their problem solving. So the government looks at the health crisis and they set out their basically what would be their federal agencies and say, figure out how to solve this. So the Department of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries starts doing this research project they call forest bathing, shirin-yoku. Shinrin means forest, yoku means bath. So basically, what they're studying is the health impact of exposing people to forested environments. And the thing that they were studying was the production of these special white blood cells called natural killer or NK cells. These cells are roaming the body looking for stressed cellular growth that could become cancerous, and they terminate it preventatively. So the interesting thing they found is that trees diffuse these chemicals all around them called phytoncides. Phyton meaning plant, side meaning killer. Phytoncides are antimicrobial, antibacterial, and antifungal chemicals. So if a fungus is attacking the tree diffuses these phytoncides into the air around it, and those phytoncides land on the fungus and they kill it. So you can think of it kind of like the tree's immune system. But what is kind of mind-blowing is that, all of our ancestors evolved under the canopy of trees. And so we have co-evolved with trees so that we can absorb phytoncides through our breath and through the skin, and that triggers the production of these NK natural killer cells. So basically, just being out there is boosting your immune strength. So that one discovery really opened up this window of research into like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different projects about trying to understand what most of us who spend time outside intuitively know all along, which is that it's healthy. Basically, human beings are evolved to live in the forests. That is like for 99.9% of our evolutionary history, we've been living out there. So we have a lot of modern health problems that are really just a direct result of not living where we're designed to live, right? So the way the Japanese also took this towards solving the economic problem was building these, you can think of it like a big retreat center out in the rural prefectures in the forest. And they'll say to people, all right, you can take the train, you can go to one of these forest therapy bases, or they call them sometimes forest therapy roads. And there's like a whole microeconomy there based around this practice of getting people to come out and spend the weekend to basically do health-oriented activities. So there's many, many, many different ways that basically forest medicine is practiced in Japan. It's not a monolithic thing, but you might find yourself doing like some yoga and some breathing and some chilling and some eating soba noodles and, sauna, onsen, whatever it is. It's kind of just like this health retreat that they create outside of the urban center. So that also ameliorates some of the economic problem that they were struggling with the rise of urbanization in the 1980s.
Wow. So you mentioned phytoncides there. And I mean, if preventative medicine is not the biggest and most awe-inspiring reason to get out into the forest more, I don't know what is. But I'm wondering whether there's any benefit of forest bathing on stress levels.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. I mean, basically when I think about the health impacts of forest bathing, I kind of break it down into these three categories. There's like the physiological impacts, so things like improved respiration, decreased heart rate, uh, improved circulation, whatever. There's all these things that happen in the body, and that's all happening kind of below the threshold of your attention, right? Then there's the mental health benefits, which I'll talk about in a second. And then there's kind of these, depending on how you like to look at the world, you might call them spiritual or psycho-spiritual or relational benefits, just the the healing that comes through feeling more connected, more related to the earth. And when you talk about these, it sometimes is kind of a funny thing where it's hard to put something in a category because it might be all three at the same time. But yeah, essentially, so there's two things at play in forest bathing when we talk about health. And you kind of can research them separately. There's the nature immersion part where it's like, okay, what is it about being outside that is healthy for us? And then the other side of it is kind of what are the health impacts of being in a state of rest and relaxation. And this is where forest therapy kind of combines these things. So on the nature side, there's so much fascinating research about this. There's like this one study they did where they wanted to understand the impact of people just seeing the color green. And it wasn't even like trees, it was just painting the walls green. So they did this in a hospital and they did this in a prison. In the hospital, they found that people in the green rooms healed a lot faster than the people not in the green rooms, and that the green induced a state of relaxation that boosted their body's natural ability to heal. In the prison, it lowered aggression, and people were just way more chill. So there's some things like this where our bodies are, this is like an evolutionary memory where we're designed to have certain reactions to certain things. There's also this interesting thing about fractals, where seeing a fractal pattern calms the mind, makes us less stressed, because essentially they're natural patterns.
I was just going to say, you have to define fractal for me.
Oh, fractals, it's like a flower has a fractal pattern where it's kind of a geometric, how to say this, like a geometric pattern that it shows up in so many different natural things like leaves and flowers and water, and how all the beings kind of move or are designed in this way, versus like when you walk through a city, you see a lot of angles, like right angles, square shapes, boxes. So when you get like deep down into the way the human brain and the human body is designed, we feel calm when we feel our environment is supportive of our survival. So seeing the color green, hearing water, hearing birds, these things all signal to the back of our brains that we're in a safe place. This is where we want to be. This is where it feels good. It's like some of this, when you get real deep down into it, seeing a mountain and a river coming out of it, this is also a sign to our bodies that this is a place where I could survive because I have the resources I need. So basically, your body is designed to read the environment around you, and a state of relaxation is really contingent upon all these environmental factors that are not about analysis. It's not about what you think about it. You might think, the city is very beautiful, whatever. That doesn't really matter. Your body isn't thinking that. Your body is reading the environment and saying, is this a place that I can survive? And when you have that, then you relax. So, okay, our bodies have a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. And this is part of our autonomic nervous system, which means we can't control being in one or the other. You might have heard of the sympathetic nervous system being the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze response. So when our bodies feel that we are in danger, it's going to increase adrenaline, increase cortisol. It's going to increase our heart rate, increase our blood flow, because what's happening is your body is getting you ready to run. It's either you're going to fight or you're going to run away because your body is sensing danger. And basically, when we were living, out in the forest, you would have this happen once in a while. But then after you resolved whatever was giving you that stress response, you would shift back into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is known as rest and digest. So basically, when you're in your parasympathetic nervous system, your muscles are healing, you're digesting food and getting the nutrients out of it into your body. You're repairing all these things that get stressed out when you are running away from, a big cat or a wolf or something. But basically, part of my theory about what's going on today is that people spend absolutely every waking minute in their sympathetic nervous system because we carry around these little stress machines in our pocket, and it notifies you every time something bad happens. Like, we're so plugged into all the bad stuff that's happening in the world. And so our bodies are kind of normalizing a level of stress that is really unhealthy. The only way to get rid of the stress hormones, particularly adrenaline and cortisol, is principally through exercise. So this makes sense biologically that, if we're running away from the wolves or the big cat, we're cleansing our body of the chemicals that our brain just dumped into our bloodstream, right? But now we're mostly just sitting around on our phones and reading the news and going really stressed out. And so it's poisoning our bodies, because if you just keep dumping that adrenaline and that cortisol into the body over and over again, and you don't exercise and you don't get rid of it, then it starts to basically become a toxic environment for your body.
So the cure is the forest. And now I'd love to talk about the how. I read your book. I know it's not all that complicated, but tell me, how, for somebody who's never even taken a walk in the woods before, and they're listening to our conversation, they are on board, they want to get it out there into the forest and get those benefits that we discussed in the first part of our conversation, what do they do?
Forest bathing is a little bit like meditation in that we're trying to get out of our heads and we're trying to get into our bodies. And that's what brings forth the rest and relaxation, the rejuvenation that we're looking for. So we're not trying to make this a analytical experience, we're trying to make this an embodied experience. So most people really struggle with meditation like I did. I sat in a meditation hall for a few years, and the way that it operates there is they say, okay, go inward, feel the breath, focus your attention on the breath. And I still do some of that in forest bathing too, but with forest bathing, you're also externalizing your focus onto the natural world around you through the senses, through the intelligence of the body. Interesting thing about your attention, it's kind of like this spotlight in your consciousness. And there are multiple things happening in your conscious experience simultaneously. One of them is the mind. It's always generating ideas. You can't silence it. You can't make it stop. But if you turn the light of your attention off of the mind and turn it on to the sensation of the body, it's not that the mind isn't still generating thoughts, but it's that you are not aware of them anymore because you are not paying attention to the thoughts. You're paying attention to the body. Mary Oliver has this great quote about attention is the beginning of devotion. So I always think the first part of it is a devotion to being what I am, which is an animal, which is a sensory being. So if you want to start, just go find some place to sit and explore it with your senses. This is the most simple way to just dive right in. You can ask yourself these questions about, okay, what are all the things that I can hear right now? And I like to have a world of no separation. So it's not like you have to find a supernatural place, supernatural. You don't have to find a fully, wild space to do this. You can do this in the middle of downtown or in a public park or whatever. So you're hearing birds, you're hearing airplane, you're hearing whatever is happening around you. Just placing your full attention on sound. And then maybe you shift to touch. What does everything here feel like? This is often really cool because we think we know, but until you have the immediate experience, you don't actually know. So just go and touch the bark of all the trees, maybe with different parts of your skin. We often touch with our hands, but maybe you want to touch it with your elbow or your foot or your face or whatever. Feeling this, being immediately present with the sensation of this touch. And then, yeah, maybe it's sight, looking at everything very, very closely. So now we're just practicing externalizing our attention outside of the mind and into the body and through the senses. Once you get yourself through that, that's when I tell people, okay, really simple. Find a place to sit down and just give yourself permission to rest. This is a safe place to do nothing. And this is so revolutionary for people because I think we live in such a grind culture now. that we really struggle to do nothing. We feel guilty about it. We feel shame. It's like super crazy. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why people will often hire a facilitator, because I'm going to support you in doing nothing. I'm going to validate you doing nothing. This is what we're here to do, you know? Whereas when you go out by yourself, it can be hard to do this because no one's kind of holding you in that space. No one's validating that it's okay to just do nothing. But I think, yeah, just giving yourself permission to really rest and just be there. And then if you want to have friends come with you doing forest bathing, basically it's kind of like being a kid again. I do this a lot where it's like, okay, let's just go out and trade sensations. So, we're walking around and it's like, oh, feel this rock. Just feel this rock. This rock is amazing. Oh, yeah. Look at this flower. No, no, really look at this flower. Like, really get in there. Smell this tree. Have you ever smelled anything like this tree? And smell is super trippy because it takes you places, right? Like the sensory data we have from smell in our brains references some of our deepest memories. So that can be a real trip for people. The smell of a pine sap or something just takes you right back to being a child at Christmas time or whatever. So the idea is to not try to like get anything out of it, which is a very challenging thing, I think. This is the same challenge for meditation with Western people because we live in a society that's about achieving things. Like we want to feel like we did it right and we got what we were supposed to get out of it. And so this is kind of the opposite philosophically. It's like just learn how to be here, just learn how to rest, how to relax, and let the more than human world hold you in that process because it's very patient and it doesn't demand that you do anything or be anyone or prove anything for you to get all these benefits that it's offering you. So that's like 101. If you get the book, you can go through the 10 steps. I think that's super cool. There's like this thing on the internet called TLDR. You know about this? It stands for too long didn't read. So my book is a very short book. Like I wanted it to be. It's called a pocket guide, and I love that about it. But the TLDR of my book is like just go outside, move slowly, don't forget to smell things.
Oh, yes, that's perfect. How many words was that? 15? Okay, well, even though it is that simple, I still have some questions. This is like rapid fire round, if that's okay. How often should we be forest bathing? Like once a week, once a month, once a year?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're talking about this from like a health perspective, the Japanese researchers suggest that you go for like 3 hours every 2 weeks, like a 3 hour immersion once every 2 weeks, and that's going to pull your immune system back up to the strength that it needs to be at. If you're talking about this for a mental health thing, if that's really like why, if that's your motivation, um, I think just 30 minutes a day every day can be really awesome. And it's not like if you miss a day, you're going to lose all your quote progress. I always tell people there's no progress. There's just doing it. Um, and then yeah, honestly, I think it's even if you can kind of get this into your lifestyle where you can do this anywhere. Like I'll be waiting in line for coffee sometimes and I'll feel sad because everyone's on their phone, right? Like we're so afraid of boredom that we need to be stimulated constantly. And I'll just do a little bit of like forest bathing right there. I'll just kind of come back to my body and say, what does it feel like to be breathing right now? And what does it feel like to be standing here? What does it feel like? What's the air temperature? What do things look like here? What are the sounds here? What are the smells here? Just coming back to this moment and not stressing out about it. Like I think a lot of people want to have the thing that isn't how to say this. There's this Chinese expression about tension is who you think you should be, relaxation is who you are. So I've encountered people that want to do forest bathing or mindfulness meditation or yoga or whatever, and they have an idea of who they want to be, who they wish they were, right? And so their entire practice is characterized by a certain level of tension because they don't want to just relax into being who they are right here, right now. They want to be more advanced or have like some special superpowers or whatever. So for me, a big part of this is just like let go of this needing to make you feel special. Recognize this as part of your belongingness to the earth, like the birthright of being part of this world, and that you're never going to be perfect at it. You're always going to come back to that ego self, to all this mental chatter. That's okay. That's not a problem. Just learn how to put that down for a minute, and just a minute can have a big impact. Like you see this with mental health practitioners have started to pick up on this. If someone's having a panic attack, they'll say, okay, what are 5 things you can see right now? What are 4 things you can hear right now? What are 3 things you can touch right now? What are 2 things you can smell right now? Right? So it's just breaking you out of this cycle of stress, this rumination cycle. We get stressed and then we get stressed that we are stressed, and then it just spirals, right? So even just learning how to kind of lean on the more than human world and say, can you support me in coming home to my body right now? That can make a huge difference, or it has for me.
This was rapid fire, Ben, which means quick and easy answers.
Oh no, okay, okay, I'll be good. Okay.
No, I'm totally kidding. Okay, so rapid fire, we're re entering rapid fire round. How long? I know you said you can get benefits in just a minute. Where should a beginner start in terms of time duration?
um let's say 30 minutes rapid fire.
Do you have to be sitting? Can you be doing a rigorous hike? Can you be doing something in the middle of those two extremes?
Yeah, you don't have to be sitting, but I don't think you can do this while doing a rigorous hike. You need to be moving slow enough that you can actually pay attention to the experience. So, a rigorous hike is not going to be a great way to do forest bathing.
Should we leave our cell phones at home?
Gosh, that's a controversial one. If you're someone that leaving your cell phone at home makes you feel an unbelievable level of stress and anxiety, then I'd say no. Because if you're stressed and anxious the whole time, there's no point in doing it at all. But if you're someone that can leave your cell phone at home and not feel hugely stressed, then yes, I would say that really, really supports this work of just being here now.
Should we leave our kids at home?
Well, that's such a it depends question. Children are all so different and in wonderful, wonderful ways. I think actually kids are great mentors at forest bathing. Have your kids teach you how to do it. Just unleash them on the forest and say, I want you to show me what, everything smells like here, or like bring me things that, feel cool in your hands. Make it a game, make it fun. Like this is good stuff for kids. I think kids desperately need this right now because they're growing up at a time where so much is happening kind of digitally that having a sensory education and the sensory development of the body is hugely important for human development. So if your kids are down, yeah, I'd say bring them along for sure.
I I know this is rapid fire and I'm doing what I just scolded you for, but I have to say I went on a little hike with my two daughters last weekend and they just tune into their senses naturally everywhere, but especially in the woods. Oh, this bark is so rough, or look at the colors of this mushroom, or they do it naturally. And so I think it's quite interesting that we have to formalize and give a fancy name to something that our younger selves did, without thinking about it. How interesting is that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's all part of kind of a cultural programming we go through where in this country and probably in the West, we have descended out of Enlightenment philosophy with a lot of scars. And one of those scars comes from Mr. Descartes, who basically suggested that I think, therefore I am, that everything about consciousness is a function of the mind. And that's what spawns a culture of mind over matter, that it says the body is not intelligent, the body is just a machine. And Descartes basically said the human body is a machine and all animals and plants are just machines. They don't have any innate intelligence. And the impact of that philosophical discourse on our modern culture is enormous. So, yeah, I think basically when we go to school, we get this idea of mind over matter. And it's like your body wants to go to the bathroom and the teacher says, no, you have to hold it. Or your body says, I need to run around right now. And the teacher says, no, you have to sit down right now. So we have a culture of kind of numbing ourselves and denying the instinct of the body so that we can fit into our culture. And then, just like you said, what is natural to the child basically becomes completely demolished.
Okay, back to rapid fire. One more question. Is there a way to do it wrong? And if so, what is it?
No, there's no way to do it wrong. As long as you are here, you're doing it. You're doing it all the time. Your body is literally doing it all the time. You don't even realize it. So it's happening. Your attention just hasn't recognized that it's happening right now. It's like you're breathing all the time. Your heart is beating all the time. You're in your body all the time. It's all unfolding. It's all happening. Your body is picking up all this information from the world. You're just not paying attention.
Your spotlight's not on it.
Yeah, exactly. Your spotlight is not on it. So this is happening all the time. It's always available to you. Just come home. Just come home to the body.
Well, I have one more question for you, Ben, before we wrap up. And it is for the listeners who are listening right now. And they're a little bit skeptical, but they're willing to try. Like maybe they just don't like the woods or ticks or mosquitoes. Maybe they don't have time or they think they don't have time. Maybe, I don't know, maybe, the weather's not right. Like insert excuse. So for those listeners who are skeptical but are willing to try, how many forest bathing um, outings should they go on before they say this isn't for me? Like how long until maybe some benefits are felt that'll keep them going?
I mean, I personally say I'll try anything twice. That's my threshold. Yeah, maybe that's a good way of doing it. So yeah, uh, give it two shots. And honestly, I think if you can find a guide to take you on a walk, that's going to make a huge difference in your perception of the value of the practice. It's kind of like when people sign up to do a yoga class versus watching a yoga video on YouTube and following along in their house. Basically, when you're doing it by yourself, you are simultaneously the participant and the facilitator, which is actually quite challenging. So when you go on a walk with a guide, you have offloaded all of this stuff onto them. I don't have to know what time it is. I don't have to know where we are. I don't have to worry about, my physical safety. I don't have to worry about getting lost. I don't have to worry about any of this stuff. It makes it so much easier to just sink into the practice. And then once you've done that a few times, then I think you can take that learning and just apply it in your daily life so much more easily.
Well, I must say, I loved your book. I'll tell the title one more time. It's Healing Trees, A Pocket Guide to Forest Bathing. Because for those of us listening who have never done anything like this before, this is stepping some toes into uncharted waters. Your book is meant to be a guide. It's meant to help you on your journey into these uncharted waters, perhaps. So, Ben, I'll link to your book in the show notes for anybody listening. But I'm wondering if there's another place where listeners can learn more about you and your work.
Yep, I have a website. It's integralforestbathing.com. And if you sign up for my mailing list, I send you a digital copy of my first children's book for adults that I call The Wild Garden, which I love. And I'm actually going to release my second children's book for adults later this year, which is about phone addiction. And I'm going to be doing a bunch of retreats next year, forest therapy trainings, forest therapy walks here in Los Angeles if people are local. Yeah, I teach some online courses. So there's lots of different ways to engage. And yeah, just hitting up my mailing list is probably the best way of keeping in the loop about, what's going on.
Ben, thank you so much. I learned an awful lot, and I'm so excited to get out there into the forest. So thank you so much.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.